everybody, and welcome to this conversation, Communicators We Love. And our very first guest for the series, because this is a new series by Makita PR, is with Vickie Remoe. Vickie, welcome.
Cue applause, cue applause, cue applause.
I am so excited to be speaking to you. And let me just explain a little bit, because this is the very first conversation, the inspiration for this series. So Makita PR is a communications consultancy. And one of the ideas we had was, we know that there's so many amazing African feminist communicators out there. And we actually don't feel like they get as much shine as they need to. And so we wanted to have a series where we have a conversation with people who we love, people that we think are great feminist communicators. And you are one of those feminist communicators.
You don't even know how, sorry, I'm just trying to put this on my social media, but you don't really know how you saying that I'm one of your favorite feminist communicators means to me, because I feel like it's like respect. Like, it's like Michael Jackson saying to somebody, oh, you're the next king of pop. You're like, oh, if Michael Jackson says it, then it must be true. So no, you are like a phenomenal voice in our community, both within the continent and globally. And if you say that you love me, then I know that I'm doing something right. So yeah, here for
You're doing lots of amazing things, right? And I want to start by sharing a little bit why I love you and why I love the communications you do. First of all, you're extremely versatile. I have seen you do everything from organize photo shoots, shoot billboard campaigns, to do marketing for companies selling fruit juice, to working for development agencies, to fundraising, to hosting TV shows. And so when I think of a communicator who's extremely versatile, to being an influencer, I'm like, okay, is there anything Vickie Remoe can't do? And I think the answer is there's nothing.
No,
No.
I would disagree, because I think what it is that I'm a storyteller. And I think when you embrace storytelling as your calling, then any actual medium, whether it's photography or video or writing or anything that is an expression of a narrative, you will easily be drawn to it. And I think that's, and also you're not afraid of it, right? So before I started doing billboard advertising for Printex in Ghana, I'd never done a billboard advertising campaign before. But I was like, it's just a story, but it's like a story. The picture has to tell the story. I could do that. And so, yeah, sometimes I think people feel like they don't know what I do because of that reason, because they see me in so many different lights. But I'm just like another storyteller like everybody else. It's just that I think I'm a multimedia storyteller. And so it's easy for me to be across different kind of channels and not feel like I'm leaving my comfort zone.
I think that's actually a really, really helpful way to put it. And maybe share a little with us about what got you interested in storytelling to begin with.
I think it was accidental. I don't think it was an intentional desire to be a storyteller. But because I spent so much time in the US and having to consume my home country, Sierra Leone, and then the continent as a whole from an external lens, and feeling that there was a disconnect between what I was consuming there about where I was from and where I was from, like the way that I knew it, made me kind of feel like when I come back to the continent, when I come back to Sierra Leone, I'm just going to tell it the way that I think it ought to be done. And so I started coming back home right after the end of the Civil War, and volunteering in a school, doing fundraising for internally displaced people. And when I left, I would take photos to like document what I had seen. And then blogging was like just taking off. And so then I launched a blog. And so the blog was initially just to like chronicle my experience, and it became bigger than that. And over time, you know, I don't know how that, evolved, but I end up becoming like, oh, I have this blog that's on Sierra Leone. and, oh, there's an audience. I think once you start realizing that somebody, even if it's just one person, is connected to the work that I'm doing, that they find it meaningful, you then feel like you have this obligation to keep providing them with the content. And so it started off with a blog, and then it went into, the TV show. At some point, I also did radio every Saturday morning in Sierra Leone. And then naturally, then people started mistaking me for a journalist. Like, because I was on TV, they'd be like, oh, Vickie, you're a journalist. You should come over here and cover this thing. And I'm like, no, I'm a talk show host, which is very different from being a journalist. And but then I also felt like there were stories I wanted to tell, and I wanted to do them justice. So after 4 years hosting my TV show, I felt like, well, let me go see what this journalism thing is about before I say that I'm not a journalist. So I applied to attend graduate school at Columbia University, and I only applied to Columbia University. It's the #1 school for journalism in the world. I'm not boasting. It's not me that says this.
I mean, please boast. Why not? Why not? Like, we have to get our flowers whilst we're alive. Go on.
I'm not the one that's saying this. It's the experts, the people who know these things. They say it's the best in the world, and I don't want to argue with them. So I only applied to Columbia, and I said, if I don't get into Columbia Graduate School of Journalism, it means it's not my calling. Because if I can't get into the top school, what's the point? So I got into the top school. So then I went and did that for a year. And I realized that there is an actual science to storytelling. There is an actual science there's a whole system. I mean, my degree is actually a Master's of Science degree, even though it's journalism. You'd kind of think that it's a Master's of Arts degree, but it's a science degree because storytelling is a science. And there is a very, very kind of strict way to tell a narrative. Like, you gotta have to go through the steps, and you need to figure this out. And also, being a journalist is so different from being a talk show host. You're not just talking. It's about providing context and helping and being fair and being balanced and having that kind of background. So now that I have returned to my TV show post-graduate school, it is a completely different experience because my lens is totally different. When I sit down to interview a weaver on the side of the road in southern Sierra Leone, the levels of which I can communicate with her and help her express herself and share her story with the audience, it's just different because of now this scientific approach that I have to storytelling. So yeah, I was naturally drawn to it. I think as most Africans in the diaspora are, we always feel like there is a disconnect between the way the continent is projected globally and how we experience it, and not really feeling like that was my calling, and just coming home and saying like, oh yeah, let me just post something on a blog, and then finding an audience, because people hadn't seen or weren't seeing that kind of content about Sierra Leone online. And then that just kind of took me down this whole journey of self-discovery while I'm discovering myself, I'm discovering my country, and I'm discovering the sub-region. And that's really been a blessing.
That's really amazing and super inspiring, to hear the journey from starting as a blogger, having a TV show, and then going to journalism school too. It almost feels to me to formalize your education and to fill maybe a few gaps that you thought you might have. That's really incredible. And
my first degree was in political science, and at the time I thought I wanted to do exactly what my mom did, which would be to get into foreign service and international development kind of work. But then I just didn't, feel passionate about it. So I waited, and I'm glad I waited, because I think in waiting, I was able to discover my true calling.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you for sharing that. And so I just want us to talk a little bit about this current context where we're in the midst of a global health pandemic. And I've been following you. Well, I follow you, I think, on all channels. So I've also seen.
Ditto. I follow you back.
That's a lot of mutual love. Yeah. And so I see all the work you're doing, including some really incredible fundraising to support facilities where they're treating people with COVID-19. And I also feel like fundraising is a communication skill, right?
Girl, what? Absolutely.
So maybe
Yeah.
let's talk about it from, from both angles. From like, how do you as a communicator approach fundraising? But then also, what are the stories that you feel are important to tell in this current moment?
Okay, so the first thing is that, when I came to Sierra Leone, borders closed, pandemic. And my natural instinct was to reach out to like the people who are doing the comms around COVID for the government to say, hey, I'm here. I'd like to volunteer my time. I'd like to like help with comms in any way whatsoever. No one took me seriously.
Like you reached out and people didn't respond.
No, oh, they responded. We did meetings and calls, and they said, "Oh, yes, 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 we totally want this help," and nobody followed through. Nobody wanted the help. Followed up, sent emails like, "No, really, like I can help in this way. In fact, you don't have to pay me." And it was like, "No, not interested." But then seeing the gaps in the national comm strategy and just be like, "Oh my God, I'm gonna pull my hair out." And I thought that I really believe that that was how I would contribute towards the local response with regards to the pandemic. Being rejected there, I just said, well, okay, I'm just gonna chill. And then while still just like thinking, oh, what can we do around comms? I saw something that was posted online by this doctor who I follow, and it was simple, something as simple as, oh, if you want to know how prepared facilities are for COVID-19, go to the nearest hospital and ask them what they don't have. What they have. You'll find out that most of the basic vital medical tools that are needed are not there. Like, that's odd. Like, we've heard the government's raised this and done that. So why should this be? So I reached out to him personally, just like, hey, can I come to the facility to just see what it's like? I went, suited up in PPE, went into the COVID isolation center, and what I saw basically was a building with beds. And it felt like preparation on the medical side hadn't been done. And I was like, well, let me just ask them what these things are. And they provided them, and I looked and saw that they were available locally, priced them out. And I literally came back to my desk, picked up the phone, and started calling people that I knew to say, hey, this hospital doesn't have this, the airports are closed, if any of us get sick, this is where we need to go. What are you willing to do? Can you make a contribution? And people did. And within like 4 days, I was able to raise everything we needed to equip the isolation unit for the country's largest hospital.
Wow.
And got it all the equipment they needed, including their triage. And then there was money left over. And I'm like, well, if these people were so willing to give, maybe there are more people out there who are thinking, I want to do something, but they don't know how to channel their generosity and their philanthropy. And I was like, well, what is this really about though? Like these doctors that are working in this way, or, if patients come, they don't have tools, what is this about? And I was like, this is ultimately about dignity, that the people who are doing the work during this pandemic should have everything they need to do the best they can. And also citizens, whether they're wealthy or poor, should have like some basic access quality of care, that the place should be clean, the tools should be there, because that's the only way that this is going to work. And so that's what I was thinking when I launched the C19 Dignity Project. And as of today, it's been almost, I think, 7 weeks. We launched on May 3rd. So 7 weeks. And we've been able to raise, I think as of today, $57,000
That's
locally.
US dollar, Sierra Leonean dollars.
No,
Okay.
no, no, US dollars.
Wow, 57,000 US dollars. That's incredible.
Yeah, which is 570 million leones. But yeah, $57,000. And it's just me and two volunteers.
Wow.
And gone to facilities. We've supported over 430 COVID beds, 11 facilities. We've been to various regions in the country. My office right now is like a depot for medication and medical tools. This weekend, we're heading out to the eastern region in Sierra Leone to deliver medication. We're also going to a mother and child hospital to deliver medication and tools. And so, yeah, it's just our normal every week. we get requests that come from different facilities, and we try to meet those requests. And the reason why it's possible is because of the power of storytelling. It's that I'm using images and words to communicate where the gaps are, and what the need is, and people can read them and connect to these stories, and that's why they're donating. It's really the power of storytelling.
That's really incredible, Vickie. And I just want to say this is like another example why I love you and I love the work you do, right? Because you pick a cause and you're so passionate about the cause and you get all of us inspired to support. So thank you for this work.
Thank
Um,
you.
and in the midst of doing this work, it's obviously quite traumatic, must be quite difficult. How do you manage to take care of yourself?
You're just trying to get me to cry.
I don't want you to cry. No, I really don't. Well, you
um,
can cry if you want to,
no,
actually.
I've cried so much. I'm just now trying to like not cry. Um, this is, and I think across the board, everybody in the world right now, this is the worst of times, probably for most of us, especially for our generation. You know, maybe our parents remember a different time, but like I cannot remember a worse time. Actually, maybe the civil war in Sierra Leone was the worst time, but I wasn't here, so I missed out on that. But this is the first kind of, I think, really traumatic thing that has happened to me in ways that I can't even imagine. I'm, first of all, a person who normally suffers from anxiety. And I was diagnosed with PTSD years ago, and I've had to do a lot of work to like work through my anxiety, but I still have anxiety in general, like everyday anxiety. Um, so to be going to facilities during the pandemic at a time when none of my family is here, I don't have any like really, really like my usual close networks, the people that I usually access. My son is not here. My mom is not here. I'm also, even though I'm from Sierra Leone, I don't live in Sierra Leone full time. I live in Accra. So I feel like I am home, but I'm not at home. Um, I brought one small suitcase because I was coming for a couple of weeks, and I've learned that I guess I don't really need that many pairs of clothing. Like this, I don't need clothes after all because I've just been wearing the same thing for almost 3 months and I'm still living, which is a good thing. Which is a good thing to learn. So this period has been incredibly painful for me, and every day is a struggle. I'm not even gonna lie. And the other difficulty now is because I'm no longer, I've had to accept that I'm not a private citizen in Sierra Leone, right? I'm just not anyone. I'm a public person. And with being a public person comes responsibilities. There was a time when I would use my channels to talk about all kinds of feelings and all kinds of things. And I no longer feel like I can use my platforms in that way. So it doesn't offer me the release that it once does, because now I feel like all my platforms are really a communal space. It's a place, there's spaces to amplify the community, the work, the mission, other people, other projects. It's no longer a space about, my heartache and like what I'm feeling, frustration. This is like, because people, what I've learned is that stories are really, really powerful. And I write things that make people cry. I write things that make people full of joy. Like I have write things that inspire people. And I've learned that like I can no longer put out stuff that makes people feel negative feelings when I don't have a solution for them, where there's no call to action attached. I can't just say, I'm really, really like my heart is breaking and I'm just like overwhelmed and I'm sad, because then everybody's just going to be sad because and then it's like, oh Vickie, we're so sorry, what can we do? Oh, I'll start getting inbox messages and long emails. Oh Vickie, when I read this I was crying with you. Oh my sister. And I'm like, oh God. And then you have to then now become like comfort to people that you've hurt because you've been hurt. So I tend to now just be in my own space. And the other terrible thing about that is I'm the kind of person who usually buries my emotions in my work. Work is where I go to lose myself. And now I don't have that much work because of COVID. So I'm not as busy. There's no work for me to drown myself in. My son is not around for me to like lose myself in the service of like the one person I care about the most. My mom is not around to like annoy me and distract me. My sister is not around. It literally is just me and my thoughts and my feelings. So it's very hard. But I'm taking it 1 hour at a time. I mean, 1 hour at a time. I'm like, is it 3 o'clock? Okay, we made it to 3 o'clock. Let's see how the next hour goes.
Wow,
So
that's a lot,
yeah,
Vicky.
yeah,
That's a lot. And I feel, especially, I don't know, for me, that's something a little bit sad about losing that space where your social media is also a bit of a
yeah,
release for you, right? And I know what you're speaking about. I know that I've had to kind of like, I know I've also had to kind of change my use of social media, especially
yeah,
Twitter, where I used to say anything and everything,
yeah.
but I also work for an institution as well as having my own consultancy, as well as
Mhm,
doing other things.
mhm.
And I'm like, there are donors following me. I don't know if I can talk about feeling horny on Twitter anymore, which is something I
Yeah,
used to be able to do.
yeah.
So I mean, where do you go to for release? Where do you go to for like comfort?
Right now, my really good friend Stephanie, who is quarantined with me or staying home with me, we watch a lot of RuPaul's Drag Race. And the sad thing is, we've now finished the entire series, which is probably why my heart is hurting because if we had just saved some episodes, we would be back for the all 12 seasons. We have watched these. We have watched All Star 1 and All Stars 2, and there's nothing left to watch. And we are like,
Wow.
I'm dying. I'm like, RuPaul, please save your sister. Save us. But there's something just so delightful and colorful about drag. And it has so much talent and that I just love. Like, I totally love it. And every time I watch an episode, like, I'm just giddy and I'm so happy. And so we started watching, randomly discovered 2 nights ago that like they just released RuPaul's Drag Race All Stars 3, which is new. So we watched the 2 episodes. We're waiting for the next one to come out. But it brings me so much joy. Like, I should write a personal letter to RuPaul. Like, dear RuPaul, bitch, I love you.
I love it. And now you've given me a show that I can watch because
You
yes.
absolutely have to watch it because, oh no, it's just so fantastic. There's the artistry, there's just like the artistry in song and dance and performance, and also there's just so much drama, girl. Okay, like so much
We
drama.
love drama.
Yes,
We
I love
love
it. But
drama.
it's also so much heart. And it really, I mean, I understand why she's won a couple Emmys for it because it really is an incredible platform.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah, I know it's lovely. Yeah, love it.
So I think from like our conversation so far, people might get why they need to invest in communications. I find that usually, whether it's a company or an NGO, most people just under invest in communications. I think you've spoken to like the value of that. But is there anything else you would say as to,
Um,
why NGOs, companies, governments should actually invest more in communications?
I think so. I tell people, or I try to tell them, that everything we believe about, specifically the United States of America, everything we believe about the possibilities, or the reason why we flock there, it is stories. It is stories. It is the stories we've been told and believe, and the way they tell the narrative about who America is, what America is about. It is the story. And even when like people are musicians and like they launch a new record, like a new artist is discovered, they will tell you that one story. Rihanna was just walking, growing up with her daddy. Somebody saw her, discovered her, boom, da da da. And you're like, oh, you feel like you know Rihanna because you know her story, right? Jay-Z is in Marcy Project, he's a drug dealer, he's a this, boom, he means the Mojas, boom. It is a story. All of these things. Beyonce, girl group, winning this, parents growing up, Houston, blah, blah, blah. It is a story. And what we underestimate in our market is that human beings, we're like, stories are everything. The narrative is everything. It is what we believe. It is how we understand and process who we are, where we are, what is the meaning of our lives. Religion is a story. I mean, I can go on and on and on. Like, everything is one big story. And what I find really the most reaffirming about this is everything that I have done that anyone can say is a successful thing is because of the story that I told about that thing that made it happen. If I write a proposal or pitch to a client that gets funding, it's the story that I wrote about how I could impact that person's organization or institution that gets me the deal. If I get sponsorship for my show, it's the story I told about what the show was going to accomplish that created a belief and trust for them to invest in me. Everything I do, this fundraiser, um, it is simply that I told the story of the need in public health service delivery, the needs of doctors, and the fact that we all deserve dignity, and people, it resonates. It is nothing but words. And so for organizations that think, oh, we don't have money, the first thing we're gonna cut is our like spending budget. I'm like, okay, boo, do what you gotta do. But ultimately, the reason why there is so much struggle globally over, who should be censored, who should be able to do what kind of political ad on what platform, Donald Trump this and this that and da da. It is all about trying to control the narrative and control who sees what when, so that you can have that influence, that relationship, that trust, that that person believes you and does what you say. So yeah, I it is unfortunate that the people that I reached out to volunteer comms for the government and the country didn't take me up on my offer, because I would have made them shine, girl.
Yep, you would have. You would have. And it's
And
their
now,
loss.
yeah,
But
and now
but civilians gain, right? Like the
yeah,
country as a whole is
exactly. The country's
benefiting.
game, yeah, the people's game. Because now it's like, even the things that they've done that are mishaps, because they don't handle the comms well, it it amplifies that it's a mishap. But when you have a
Yeah.
good comms person, even your mishap, you can use comms to mitigate the fallout around your mishap, and talk to people from a position of empathy where they understand, okay, maybe this, but at least you can't give them a story, my sister. But if you miss that opportunity, then like, you're behind the narrative and it's too late to catch up.
Sure. And what advice would you have for maybe a young person who wants to become a communicator like yourself? What would you recommend they do?
Two things. The first thing is to really practice writing, and to practice writing, but not from a first person narrative. Because I think that one of the things that's very difficult is that here people are taught like how to write this like composition about myself, and when they start writing, like, there is a way that they're stuck in that narrative of like I and me, and they don't know how to create a scene with the language that can that takes people in, that you're there, but you're not there, right? So practice writing, but not from, this is my opinion, right? Don't just write opinion pieces, write different kinds of writing. And the other thing I would say is go and interview people, right? Go and interview like random people. Make it your business to like just schedule just somebody you like, people you like, admire. Go and talk to them and try to see if you can get their story from them, right? Have a conversation. Say, I want to understand the what, where, when, where, and how of this person, of this job, of this brand, of this woman on the streets who I walk by every day. I wonder what her story is. And so I think if you make that a habit, then when you're just starting out, even if your writing is not great, the content though is there, right? The content is there. You've built that muscle memory of telling narratives about things other than like my opinion, what I think, right? You can, this person, this brand, etc. And then if I can just add to that, I would also say in this day and age, you really, really need to be digitally savvy, because without that, then you just have less of a chance of reaching an audience, right? So it's about, okay, how do I bring my content to platforms that will amplify, that I can use to amplify the work and reach a larger audience? Okay, and then one more last thing is, of course, then you should always write with an audience in mind. Who are you writing for? Who are you trying to communicate with? And if you can think about that person and how they'll react to the language, the scenery, will they connect to it? Like, what will resonate? What will resonate? Then you'll find like more, I don't know, structure, and you'll know that your work has a place to go and people who are willing to accept it.
That's super helpful advice. And I think even for experienced communicators, very relevant and like important reminders. The other thing is you're also an entrepreneur, you're a business owner. So what
First
advice
and
would you have?
foremost.
Yes. What advice would you have for somebody who wanted to become an entrepreneur, say in the field of communications?
I don't think that you should decide what your business is in terms of what you sell or what your services are. I don't think you should be the one to decide. You have to let the market inform what your services are. I feel like sometimes, all entrepreneurs, sometimes when you're starting out, you have an idea of something you want to do, but it's not necessarily something that's going to meet a need or a want or solve a problem locally or in your market. And so then you can do it, it can have the nice branding, it can look this, da da da, but because it's not meeting a need, you won't have customers. And so the most important thing is that whatever you do, it is, and the reason why I'm saying a need, and I mean, a business can either be one that meets a wants business, like luxury products for the most part are wants, right? Or a business can be a needs business. In context of the continent, because purchasing power is lower than in other places, you have to think about the things you provide. Your business will be more viable if it's in the needs category. And within that, you think, okay, do people need this thing? And then what way or what part of it will they be willing to pay for? Because if they need it but they're not willing to pay for it, then they don't really need it, right? And so it's constantly asking that question and refining it over time, and not being so set on saying like, oh, so for example, you could be a documentary photographer. That's who you are, right? That's the business. You want to do documentary photography. That's the service you want to provide. But in your market, people don't need it as much. What they need is a wedding photographer, right? So you can sit there and you can say, well, I don't want to do weddings. I'm a documentary photographer, right? Or you can do wedding photography, meet a need, and then slowly, once you're building that, find a way to also kind of less more, but in a passion kind of way, do the one that you think is what you want to do. And yes, it will take longer for your want to maybe manifest itself because it's not being fueled by like the one that people are being paid for. But then that's your responsibility then to make sure that the thing that you want to do, that's like, no, I really want to do documentary photography, you continue to do that. But from the entrepreneurial perspective, you just have to remember that a business is not a business if it's not meeting a want or a need, and there is no exchange of service for money, and you got to make the money, you got to get the bag.
I mean, that's such a relevant example because I have lots of photographer friends, and I feel like almost all of them hate shooting weddings, but they all say that's where their money is.
My sister, you have to stop fighting this thing. You have to stop fighting this thing. I've shot weddings. And yeah, it's not something I would say, oh, it's what I love to do. But if I'm available and someone says, Vickie, I'd love to book you for my wedding, my team will go and shoot weddings. I went to Columbia Journalism School to study photojournalism. I never thought I'd be shooting weddings, but I will shoot weddings. Why not? If it means a couple $100s in the bag. I'm all about multiple revenue streams, sis. Like, I'm always like, listen, my line of business is very contractual. It's very like up and down, up and down, up and down. You can have a contract for a year, it can be great. You can have a contract signed for a year, 3 months into it, something changes. They say, oh, we only want to do it for 6 months. They could have committed to this, they changed. Like, it's a very, because I work on retainer, so it's very like unstable. So you have to then be open to multiple revenue streams. What other ways can you earn an income? What other ways can you make money in addition to whatever your like primary source of income is? I've sold bags online, I've sold dresses, I've sold fashion, like I've sold hair. I mean, girl, listen, I will secure the bag however it is necessary. And when I sell a bag, again, I'm writing stories about that bag. I'm writing stories about that dress. I'm still tapping into my core communication skills to do whatever it is, as long as like I can make sure that I can provide for myself financially.
So, what would you say you are first? Are you first an entrepreneur? Are you first a communicator?
Yeah. I think I'm just a storyteller. I really, first and foremost, I'm a storyteller. My storytelling is my hustle.
I love it. I love
Straight
it.
up, straight up. My story, like, if you don't want me to convince you of something, don't allow me in the room, because when I get there, I will tell you a story and confuse your mind.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so my last question, but really it's my last but one question, because this is my last question for the audience, and then I have a question which is just for myself, right?
Hmm.
Um, so you tell stories using a variety of tools and platforms.
Hmm.
What's your favorite mode of storytelling?
Girl, can't ask me that. That's a tough question. What?
I just did.
I will speak about the one that I think in this market is most powerful. I mean, probably is the most powerful everywhere. It has to be video, because, when I go to, like, a couple months ago, I was in the University of Sierra Leone, doing like a training for college students. And when I finished, the deputy president of the college's student union, was just like, "Oh, Vickie, I'm so glad to meet you." I'm like, "Oh, great." She was like, "Oh, I remember your TV show. And I remember this episode where you went this and you did this and did this. Oh, and you even went to Ghana and like you interviewed Majid Michelle, blah, blah, blah." And I was just like, "Oh, you're a fan of Majid?" And she's like, "No, I love you."
Oh, that's so
And I
sweet.
was like, "How old were you?" And she was basically in primary school at the time when she was watching the show.
Wow.
And I get that all the time. People who remember the stories that, "Oh, I remember that time you went here. I remember I've sat on a plane," and this was recently before the world closed down. It was funny as I sat on the plane with these two like very plump ladies, like African aunties. And I was just like, "Oh my God, they're like squeezing me here." And I was rolling my eyes and they were loud on the phone. When they finally got off the phone, I'm just sitting there like, the lady goes, "Vickie Romeo," because some people they pronounce it. And I was like, "Yeah." She was like, "Oh, I watch your show. Oh, it's been a while. I've not seen your show." And I was just like, and then I felt, of course, like an asshole, because I was just over there in my head saying like, but yeah, what people remember the most are the video stories that they've seen that I've told. And I also think, especially with this new season that we're producing, which is the one that's hashtag Make Sierra Leone Famous, um, we finished like 7 episodes. And when I watch them, I'm like, oh my God, this is so good. I don't feel that way. Like, my writing is, yeah, I don't get people coming up to me as much and saying, "Oh, I read this piece you wrote and, blah, blah, blah," because writing is still such a limited thing for people to access. You know what I mean? In the sense that, like, in Sierra Leone, most people are not literate. So until you're going to go to a blog, you read it. So the writing is for like a certain audience, while TV is more for a middle class audience in Sierra Leone. And so I get to reach a lot of people, middle class and lower class. And I think that because of its reach and the way that people will remember the pictures and the videos, and the stories, that definitely is my favorite model, which is why after leaving my TV show for 7 years, I still came back to it because I felt like it was the most powerful thing that I could do.
And I remember that incredible fundraising campaign you did for your TV show, and
Girl,
you exceeded each goal that you set
girl,
for yourself.
$15,000 I raised in like 30 days. It was bananas. But
That
I
is
wouldn't have
incredible.
done it if I hadn't told the story, girl. It was all
That's
about
true. That's true. That's true. And so, when is the show coming out? Do you want to tell folks?
So yes, we're gonna start broadcasting and it'll be online starting in August. We were supposed to do like 16 episodes, but we haven't been able to shoot because of COVID. So we will broadcast 9 and then just wait, and then whenever it's over, we'll go back on the road and shoot the remaining 7 to complete the season. But it really is a beautiful exploration and discovery and presentation of Sierra Leone like I've never seen it. I mean, I'm watching the show like, oh my God, this place is so beautiful. And I was there. So I think like the audience is just going to fall in love with the country. It's really my, it's
It sounds
like,
like
it's,
a gift to Sierra Leone.
yes, absolutely. This is my ode to the country, to remind people of things they've forgotten, about all the goodness that's here and all the beautiful diversity of language, of culture, and of course, we also capture a lot of folklore. So it really is going to be a treat.
That sounds amazing, and I can't wait to watch.
Yeah,
So,
girl.
my next question is really just a question for myself. So, just
Hmm.
before we went live, we were speaking about lightning, and you were speaking about lightning, and you look amazing. I mean, you look amazing all of the time, but you look amazing. The light is just hitting you right.
Yeah.
Can you give me a tip?
Okay.
How can I get my lighting to be right as somebody who has no like
I
lightning or
feel
technical
like you're
skills?
probably, what kind of light? Are you using a ring light?
No, I'm
I'm
not
using
using
a
a ring
ring.
light. I have a lamp which
Okay.
just kind of just hitting me in the face, and
I
I have
think,
the lights overhead.
yeah, I think that's probably what like if the voltage of the lighting is not enough. I always tell people that as much as possible when you're doing lighting, you want to reduce the amount of shadow, um, which either means you don't sit by a wall like we're doing, but oftentimes the best way when you're doing this because you don't want anyone to walk behind you, right? But it
Yes,
means that like you want to bounce light, so there should be light on you, but there should also be light bouncing off the wall to reduce the shadow on the wall. And the way that you can do that is if you usually have 2 or 3 light sources, to make sure that you just balance the beams. So that's kind of what I would say. But they usually, and also a ring lights could also do it very well. If you just have one of those big ring lights that they use for the makeup, you could use that also for your videos.
thank you.
I
So I'm going
have
to
I
practice
have a
that.
I have a producer. So when I want to do lighting, I'm like, hey producer, come and set up the light for me.
That's the level I need to get to. That's the level I need to get to.
Yeah.
I'm going to
So
aim
like
for
I'm
that.
in the office right now and I don't know if you can see this, but over there
Okay, we can.
over there my
Oh.
producer is so yeah, I'm just like, please bring the lights. And then if you don't like, I'm like, bring more lights. So yeah.
I love it. I love it. Vicky, is there anything final you want to say or talk about when it comes to
Um,
communications?
with regards to comms, I think that there's this thing like, a lot of times a lot of women are in comms. I don't know if like there is, I don't know. It's like when you go apply for a job, they usually put the women in comms and marketing. Like they want to use us to serve up the institutions through us. Like, go, it is a treat. Take the women, they will comes to you, like, and I just think that like to just sometimes it's very important that women are aware that they're not being used in that way. So that would be my last thing. It's that like it's yes, focus on being an excellent communicator and the skills and the science of the narrative, and less about using yourself as a visibility tool for somebody else. Like it's not. I don't think that the power of comms is not about really being seen. most of my best work is work that nobody knows that I did, because you do it for a client and your name is not written there. They'll see, they'll consume it. That's where you want to be. Get to a point where like your work doesn't need you to be in it for it to shine. And I think for women sometimes, especially when you're younger and less experienced, you might focus on the wrong thing, where you think that like it's about visibility and not necessarily about the actual narrative and storytelling.
Thank you so much, Vicky. I have really enjoyed this conversation. I feel like I've learned a lot. You know, you
No,
inspire me. I love to
no,
see you
you
shine.
girl, you're like a hero. I mean, I think that they're just things that like some of us think of doing, and especially in like on the communication for like stories you think you want to tell, and especially in the more intimate side of things. And when we think about it, you're like, you Google and you're like, oh, okay, now I already did this. All right, I'm good. I don't need to do it. It has been done. And not only has it been done, it was done like 6 years ago. It's like been done, dusted, whatever. You're not being innovative. Just leave this thing. So, yeah.
You're too kind. You're too kind. But I love the work you do. I'm a
Thank you
huge
so much.
fan.
No, me too.
Please
Ditto.
keep on being you. I'm looking forward to watching the show. And just like I just love following you on social media as well.
Thank you.
So
And I hope that, as like, I definitely want you to feel free to like tag me on Makita stuff if you need amplification. Like,
yes,
let me
please.
know, like, let me push it out and all of that, because I think, we have to amplify ourselves and
True.
lift ourselves up constantly, because if you don't shine, I don't shine, there's no shining. We have to shine together. We have to be
True.
together, all of us. So yeah,
True.
so please let me know.
True. And one of the things I forgot was I actually forgot to give people space to ask questions. So I'll just say for anybody who may be watching either now or later, if you have any questions, please put them in the comments box and we shall compile them and send to Vicky.
Beautiful.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. And we shall get some responses to you one way or the other. So Vicky, thank you so much for taking the time
Thank you
today.
so much,
It's
Anna.
been a pleasure.
And thank you to
Lots
the
of
people
love.
behind the scenes. Bye.
Yeah. Bye.